I tried an absolute ton of clarinet mouthpieces at Clarinet Fest this year and at home after the fact as well, searching for the best mouthpiece pairings with the Legere French Cut reeds. And in this video, I'm going to tell you about my findings. My name is Josh Gu, and I'm taking my years of experience learning, teaching, and performing, and sharing all of my best clarinet and music tips so you can get more out of your practice, and most importantly, have fun. You can learn more about all of my many resources at quickstartclarinet.com, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit the bell to get notified when I post new videos. Before we get into the mouthpiece and reed combos, I want to give a quick shout out to Ken Ewald, who makes these cool 3D printed mouthpiece stands. This was really useful as I was trying out this many mouthpieces. He has an Etsy shop where he sells these, some other stands, and some 3D printed tuning rings, which are pretty cool as well. I'll put a link to that in the description if you're interested in getting one of these nifty stands, which again is helpful if you're going to be trying as many mouthpieces as I tried. Between Clarinet Fest and after I got home trying some different mouthpieces as well, I've tried easily over 30 mouthpieces. I don't have the exact number. I put together some charts of some of them that I found that's like 21 to 25 or so, and then I did probably at least another dozen mouthpieces that I didn't include in the chart that I was just sort of jumping around and trying as well. So there's a ton of information here, so let's go ahead and jump into it and see which mouthpieces work the best with the Legere French Cut reeds. So my methodology for testing this out while I was at Clarinet Fest is I basically went from each mouthpiece booth to mouthpiece booth and tried an array of Legere reeds on them. Thanks so much to Legere for providing me some reeds while I was there for testing. I had everything from a 3.25 up to a 4.5 that I was testing with. I didn't really try the 4.5 on most mouthpieces. That was the strength that I was playing on my Ramon Wadkowski Model 1 mouthpiece, but it's a very, very closed tip opening, and I found that most of the mouthpieces I was testing sort of topped out around the 4 strength anyways. So mostly 3.25 to 4. I did try 4.5 on a few, and you'll see in the chart where those ones are. So that's kind of what I was working with. So there are some of these mouthpieces where probably a strength 3 would feel really good as well, or maybe a 4.25, but I didn't have those strengths, so I don't know for sure. And then in these charts, my rating wasn't necessarily rating the quality of the mouthpieces or how I felt about the mouthpieces in general, but my rating was how well did it fit with the Legere French Cut reed and how well is it matching there. So don't take these ratings as, oh, I think that mouthpiece might be a good mouthpiece for me, or that mouthpiece would definitely not be a good mouthpiece for me, unless you're actually trying to match it with the Legere French Cut. A few months ago, I changed to the Legere French Cut, and I'm like 80+% really happy with those reeds, but I wanted to find a mouthpiece that feels really, really good with them and really comfortable with them. And again, it might change over time. Maybe I'll go back to cane reeds. I will have a video coming in a few weeks where I give you the real nitty-gritty lowdown on my thoughts on synthetic reeds, so stay tuned for that. But looking at the mouthpieces now, in the chart you'll also see that there's the different mouthpieces and then the actual specs of the mouthpiece. I did the tip opening and a rough facing length based on information on the website. The facing lengths, I want to give the caveat before I show the chart that they vary from maker to maker. So one maker saying this is a medium facing length might be different than another maker saying it's medium. There was also some where I just had the number measurements and then had to kind of figure out, is that medium? Is it long? How does it relate to the other makers? So the facing length stuff may not be totally accurate or totally comparable, but there are some really interesting points about the facing length that I want to bring up. So now, without further ado, let's look at the charts and see what Legere strengths and which mouthpieces the Legere French Cut actually really matched well with. So starting off, we have the tried and true Vandoren mouthpieces. I tried a bunch here. These are the most mouthpieces that I tried because Vandoren has the most extensive lineup of different mouthpieces to try. And I found some interesting highlights. I'll let you look at the chart and sort of see what you think about it, but I want to draw some attention to a few specific things. One point of interest is some of the mouthpieces just felt really bad with the Legere French Cut reeds. It was really interesting, like the BD2 and especially the BD6, I gave it a 0 because it just really felt like it just did not want to play with the French Cut reeds very well at all. The M13 was another one where it's kind of interesting, where the M13 was kind of similar to the mouthpiece I was playing that I liked quite a bit with the French Cuts, but I didn't find that I liked it very well at all comparably. And it's also interesting with the strengths too. You'll notice some of them have just one strength and some of them have a range of strengths. And you'll probably also notice that that's kind of tied to the rating of them and how well they worked. I found that the mouthpieces that worked with the French Cut reeds worked with a pretty wide variety of strengths, and that the strengths kind of worked like you would expect, where the softer Legere reeds felt softer on the mouthpiece and the harder ones felt harder. But the mouthpieces that I felt like weren't matching as well, it was like that one strength was kind of sort of playable, but even 0.25 either direction just felt completely unplayable. So some of those are very specific, like that's the strength that felt good. Also a caveat about the strength, this is for my playing, so it might be a little bit different for you. And this was also playing in Dublin at sea level, which is slightly different than playing at different elevations, and that will make a difference as well. So that's Vandoren and kind of what I've noticed. The front runners there are the B40 Lyre and the BD4, both felt very good from the Vandoren line. So if you're playing a French Cut reed, I don't think you could go wrong with either the B40 Lyre or the BD4 from Vandoren. Now moving on to Backun, they have some new signature mouthpieces that were really fun to get to try, and they worked quite well with the French Cut reeds as well. I felt like overall too, Backun, pretty much everything they had was working pretty well. One thing that sticks out on this chart to me is the vocalese R did not feel very good. Kind of reminded me a little bit of the M13 Lyre, which makes sense because it's kind of similar to the M13 Lyre. I didn't test the vocalese H, but I do have one of those at home, so if you have a vocalese H and you're dying to play it with a Legere French Cut, leave a comment and I can let you know sort of what reed strengths are feeling good on that to me. The front runners from Backun were the Chiffren and the McGill of the signatures. And again, a lot of them felt very good and were very playable, and you can see the wide sort of strength range on these, where the 3.25 all the way to the 3.75 were working pretty darn well on pretty much all of the Backun mouthpieces, which is a great sign that there's so much flexibility there, so you don't have to worry about getting exactly the right dimensions of the mouthpiece to match up exactly with the right strength of reed, because that can be really challenging and really difficult to kind of get that perfectly, especially when you're having to pay $30 per reed. Even with the Legere letting you send them back sometimes, it's just a lot of hassle to try to get dialed in with the exact right strength. So it felt really good to me that the Legeres and the Backun mouthpieces seem to be really getting along well. Overall, I found that the kind of 3.75 strength was a sweet spot on a lot of them. I'll talk more about this in the upcoming synthetic reed video. It may have just been that one particular 3.75 reed that I had was just a good reed and felt really good to me, but I did find that there was one in particular 3.75 that was working really quite well on pretty much all of the mouthpieces, so maybe that might be a good strength to get if you're dabbling with the French Cut reeds, but that was sort of my experience with Backun. Now, before we move on to some more sort of niche and specialized mouthpiece makers like Chedeville and Brad Behn, I did want to talk about D'Addario. Unfortunately, I didn't actually get around to trying any of the D'Addario mouthpieces, but I did look at their website and kind of look at the specs of the tip opening and facing length and came up with somewhat of an estimation of what I might think would feel good with that. So here is the chart of my estimation for them. Very important that I didn't actually try these. This may not be the case at all, but this is kind of what I was feeling and what I was thinking, and what I think would probably be how I would feel with the D'Addario if I had actually tried them. So you can see that chart and look through that as well. The X0, initially when I put this chart together, I was thinking it'd probably be kind of similar to the M13 Lyre and would probably not feel great. Once you see the Chedeville chart in a second, maybe I change my mind about the X0 and it might feel better and work better with a little bit softer reeds. But I think for now I'm happy leaving it how it is in the chart. Some of the standouts here are the X5 and the X10, which I think would be quite similar to the M15, which I also liked quite a bit. So I think sort of in that ballpark would be great. There is something very interesting about the X10E here. So the X10, I think with 112 for the tip opening and kind of a medium long facing, I think I would like the X10 pretty well. The X10E, however, has a slightly smaller tip opening and a slightly shorter facing, which again, when we go look at my favorites in a little bit here, you'll see how that's so important. And I think I would probably very much dislike the X10E compared to the X10. Now that works out pretty well for me because I'm not playing in Europe and the E stands for the European pitch at 442. So I would get an X10 anyways to play at 440 because I don't need any help playing extra sharp. So for me, that would be okay. But if you are in Europe and trying to play with the French cut reeds, the X10E, I suspect would feel really bad and kind of particularly bad with the French cut. Again, I didn't actually try it, so I don't know for sure, and I'm just speculating here and estimating, but just so you know, that's something that stands out with D'Addario's lineup. Now moving on to some of the more kind of niche and specialized mouthpiece makers, I tried some of Gleichweit, which were quite good. I think my favorite one was the 9-1 model. The 7.4 was also good. I'm not going to make a chart for them just because I only tried a few. I did try substantially more of the Behn mouthpieces. I don't have exact measurements on the Behn mouthpieces on all of them, so I also won't show them in a chart. And there's also another reason that I'm not necessarily putting together a chart for the Behn mouthpieces, and that's because all of them felt kind of similar and all felt really quite good. The ones that I tried were the Epics, the Vintage, the Luna, and the Prescotts. I do have one of the Epics that I ended up getting that is in my favorites chart, which you'll see in a second. So you can get some of those measurements. But I really found that all of the models at really kind of a range of tip openings and a range of reeds felt really good. I think Brad's mouthpieces are very, very flexible, so they really kind of adapt to the reed and are kind of working with the reed and really resonant and responsive. I literally just was trying the Epic, the Prescott, and the Luna, and a 3.25 reed felt quite good on all of them. A 4 felt quite good on all of them, so there is quite a range there. The distinctions that I'll say really briefly, and again I'm going to do a more in-depth review of the Behn mouthpieces in a future video, but just really quickly, the Prescott is the sort of most affordable, kind of closest to a student model, but also very, very high quality. I found it to be very responsive, very easy blowing, very, very clear projection. The Luna was kind of fun. It had a little bit more of that dark, rich sound, but still very responsive, very flexible. And then the Epic, I think, is the most flexible out of all of them, where you can really get tons of different color and range and variety from the mouthpiece, which is really lovely and makes it a great mouthpiece to play on for especially that professional level where you want a lot of flexibility. If you're more sort of in the beginner stages, I think the Prescott gives you a little bit more stability, predictability, and response, whereas the Epic has all of those things, but is a little bit more wild and takes a little bit more taming, I think, which is great to have that flexibility at the professional level. So that's just a quick overview of those mouthpieces. Again, I'll probably do a more thorough review in the future. And then last but not least, I do have a chart for this one. This is the Chedeville mouthpieces. These ones I have actually been trying back home, so at a little bit higher elevation, so that might be changing things a little bit. And I have a handful of them that I'm checking out. Again, I'll probably also do a more in-depth review of the Chedeville mouthpieces in a future video, but here you can see the chart of how they're matching up with the Legere French Cut reeds. Again, all of them work really, really well. And that was something that I was noticing as I was trying all of these mouthpieces, is just how lucky we are that there's so many good things out there. It used to be that you had a good range from Vandoren, and that was about it unless you went into really custom mouthpiece makers. Nowadays, Vandoren's line is even bigger. You have really great options from D'Addario and Backun, and we have sort of newer or sort of more recent additions with the Chedevilles, or at least more recent to me, that are really, really great. And yes, the Chedevilles and the Backun signatures are a little bit higher price, and the Behns are quite a bit higher price for the epics and the vintage. But it's really, really fantastic that there's so many options that are just really fantastic to play on. There's so many that I would be happy to play on regularly. And now I just get the torturous task of deciding which one is my very favorite to play on more regularly. So looking at the Chedevilles, some notable things here is, again, there was quite a bit of a range for them. The SAAV1 had, I think, the most flexibility and the most range to it. A quick note, too, about the different models here and the numbers. Again, I'll go more in depth with this in the full Chedeville mouthpiece review video. But all of these tip openings you see were pretty much at the 100. But these mouthpieces come in different tip openings as well. So there's an SAV2 that's a little bit more open. There's the Umbra F1 or F2, and same thing for the Elite, that are more open as well. So there's a good range of options for tip openings depending what you like. And again, I imagine the tip openings are going to be pretty flexible on reed strings. So you can see here, we would expect the Umbra or the Elite at that F0 with 100 for the tip opening to be something that kind of wants a harder reed, probably a 3.75. However, they felt really quite good with the 3.25 as well. And again, I think this is a synthetic reed thing, which I'll go more in depth with the synthetic reed video. And in particular, I think the Umbra or the Elite would have felt good maybe even with a 3 reed as well, if you want something even less resistant there. And maybe if you want something really resistant, you could even push up to a 4 with the Umbra in particular, maybe the Elite as well. So lots of flexibility there, really, really great high quality, and so many fun options, which now brings us to the chart of my favorites. And I have a few from each company, but I think several of them hit that kind of highest rating. The highest rating I got to was a 4.5. I'll talk about this again in a future video, probably the one about the synthetic reeds, or maybe a separate video about trying equipment. But just as a brief note, when it comes to trying equipment, it's all a matter of compromise. There's some mouthpieces that were more responsive and more energetic and just had really clear projection, but maybe weren't as warm and sweet and delicate. There were mouthpieces on the other end that were really warm and rich and had great depth of tone, but maybe the response and articulation wasn't as clear. It's always a trade-off, and it's always dependent on the reed and the mouthpiece that you're playing. So it's a combination of things, and it's about finding what's sort of closest to the sweet spot for what you want in your sound. So for me, my favorites were the Brad Behn Epic, the Chedeville SAV1, the Backun Anthony McGill signature model, and then the Vandoren B40 Lyre. All of these got the highest rating. I didn't include the Schifrin signature, also got a 4.5, and I think it was the M15. No, that was the only Vandoren one that got the 4.5 as well. In the Chedeville also, the Cinema is a 4.5, and depending on the day, sometimes I think the Umbra and the Elite could hit that 4.5 as well. So there were a few other ones that were there, but I really wanted to narrow it down to a few of my favorites here that I think really were the ones that I'm really considering playing on and sticking with and really enjoyed trying out. Now, the thing that I want you to notice with these favorites is that the facing length, I think, is a really significant and important detail when it comes to matching with the Legere French Cut. If you notice, the tip openings on these are quite varied, but all of these are a medium or a medium long facing length. And I think the most interesting sort of evidence for this is looking back at the BD4. So in the Vandoren BD4, I loved the BD4 and I hated the BD4 HD. And as far as I know, the only real difference between them is the kind of density of material theoretically. The chamber and baffle and things like that, I think, are theoretically the same. However, the facing length is a little bit different as well. So in the BD4, you have the same tip opening as the BD4 HD, but you go from a medium long facing length to a medium facing length in the BD4 HD. And I think that facing length component is the killer to this. And I think with the French cut reed, you want kind of that longer facing length. Looking back at the Vandoren chart in full, if we look at some of my favorites, the M15 had a long facing length, the B40 Lyre had a long facing length, and I think those longer facings were feeling better. It's super important that facing length, just the medium, long, or short, doesn't give us a ton of information. There's more details about the whole curve of the facing itself, and the way that the facing matches with the tip opening is also very significant. So for example, the M13 Lyre had a medium long facing, but I still didn't really like it. So it's not just the facing length that's going to make a difference or matter here, but I think it is a really important component, and you want to be really careful of if you have the same tip opening, but you can get it in a longer facing length or a shorter facing length. I think opt for the longer when it comes to the French cut reeds. And of course, facing length isn't everything, just like tip opening isn't everything. There's a whole bunch more variables to the mouthpiece, which is why it really is up to your sort of personal preference and what you really like. But hopefully by looking through this chart, you're able to sort of see some strengths that might feel good for the different mouthpieces that you have. If you're considering checking out the French cut reeds and you're already playing on one of these mouthpieces, first of all, check my rating and see if it's one that I felt like did match with it. And then you can pick a strength that's going to feel good for you with that. I'll put a link in the description to the Google Doc that has all of these tables, so you can sort of check that out and see what you think and look through it and do your own research through that. Also remember that this is how it felt for me, and it may feel different for you. It definitely will feel different for you, actually. But hopefully this gives you sort of a starting point and a jumping off point if you're interested in checking out the Legere French cut reeds with any of these numerous mouthpieces that I tried. If you're playing on the French cut reeds currently and you absolutely love the setup that you're on, or hate the setup that you're on with whatever mouthpiece, or if you have a few mouthpieces and you found that it works well with some and not well with other, let me know the mouthpiece and the strength and how you felt about it in the comments below, so we can continue to accumulate some more data about this and see what's feeling the best and what's going to be the best setup for this particular reed for this particular person, at least. So I hope that this was interesting to sort of check out and see all of that data. I had a ton of fun testing these. Thanks so much to all of the companies from Legere and all of the mouthpiece makers that I got to work with and try. It was absolutely delightful to work with all of them. Everybody was so friendly and kind, and it made Clarinet Fest a lot of fun and really tiring on my mouth playing so many mouthpieces for so long every day. So I hope that this was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in another video. And last but not least, a huge heartfelt thank you to the Dennersons. This is like the Quick Start Clarinet family who supports the channel and helps to make everything that I do possible. If you would like to support the channel and get some awesome rewards in return where we can work one-on-one over video and you can have my full support moving forward on your clarinet journey, then go to quickstartclarinet.com/supporter.